Okay, welcome back to another edition of the Wolverine.com podcast. This is our TV version. My name's Chris Balas. With me, Doug Skene, Michigan's former All Big Ten offensive lineman, unshaven, looking a little surly. And
It's
looks like you,
Thanksgiving weekend, Balas. I'm just
hey,
relaxing
no,
here
we're
with
not judging
my
you.
face.
What I am saying is, man, you look relaxed and you look happy. And this is the kind of team. This is what you expect. I think you've expected all along the kind of effort when Michigan plays Ohio State. You want to see them play their best game with that passion and that hunger. In Skene, I saw it in the pregame. I predicted that they would lose. And I'll tell you when I started to wonder if this team really had a shot. There were a couple things that I heard at the end of the week, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But when I saw that team on the field in warmups and they were going through it and how jacked up they were and how confident they looked, to me, that was different than past years. And one of my colleagues said, "Oh, it kind of looks like Ohio State's going through the motions or whatever." And I said, "Yeah, that's wishful thinking. You can't tell anything in warmups." But there was something palpable. I'm telling you that you could feel it, and you saw it in the way they played on Saturday.
Well, Saturday and the previous Saturday and the previous Saturday and this throughout this whole season. I'll say it. I'm going to say it one last time, Balas. I am so happy to be wrong about about my prediction on this team, this season, this game, and what you're describing in that pregame vibe that you felt that you saw um, in this game was so gratifying to watch because we talked about it in last week's podcast. In that, in this game, it felt like Michigan's best players didn't play their best, and boy, was that the opposite against Ohio State. Michigan's best players absolutely played their best, and the rest of the guys that are critically important, the other starters on up and down that roster, played their best. This was top to bottom, just an unbelievable performance. And I got to tell you, I sat on this couch over here to my left watching this game with a friend of mine and texting with some other former players at the end. I had a tear in my eye, Balas. I had a tear in my eye sitting there watching that game, watching those players and knowing what they did and how hard they worked, and I just brought back memories for myself. I'm getting a tear in my eye right now thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah,
I am so proud of these players, what they did, and for that uniform. It means a lot. It means a lot to us former players.
yeah, it's a little dusty in here too. So, but I got to tell you, and there was something about it, man. After the game, the relief, A, the sense of relief, B, and I wrote this in the column. I said I wasn't alive, I wasn't around for the 1969 game. I think it was 6 months old, but this must have been how it felt. Where okay, because they were such a big underdog. They were a bigger underdog back then, but you're talking about a team here with three NFL receivers, and those guys earned their money, so to speak, on Saturday. Those guys are good players. That was the only reason that this game was as close as it was, frankly. But the thing about it was the you weren't the only one with tears in your eyes. Fans everywhere. It just felt like, okay, as Jim Harbaugh said, this feels like the beginning. And this is something that we've been waiting for from him, where, okay, this is the kind of old school Michigan football. And it was funny because somebody said, oh, when Harbaugh talked about blocking and tackling, he doesn't get it. And I'm like, no, 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 you don't get it. That's exactly what's going to win this game. The way that the offensive line played, the way that they tackled, the way they played together, it didn't blow assignments. To me, this is everything we've been waiting for from a Michigan team in this game.
Yeah, the performance, offensively, obviously, defensively was, we'll talk about that, but just offensively is, I mean, there was one mistake I really saw in there, Balas, one that really kind of stood out. The rest of it was like, wow, I gotta rewind that play and look at that again. Look at this block by this guy, and look at this effort by that guy, and look at the way this player performed on that play. And Eric All with his down
Yes.
blocking helmet stickers. I don't know if the kid's gonna have enough room on his helmet for the amount of helmet stickers he's got because some of the blocks he had downfield in that game. But it was just unbelievable. And then, of course, on the defensive side of the ball coming into the game, we said Hutch and Ajabo got to get after the quarterback. And then, oh my God, I had no idea that Hutch was going to drop the bomb that he did in that game. Again, the personal connection with Chris and his family and watching Aiden do what he did was just unbelievable. And I'm, at times I just sat there at the end of the game here. I'm just sitting here. I was just speechless watching this, just the
Yes.
way that they performed. And it was so refreshing to watch a team, and it brought back all the memories of all the great teams through the 90s that beat up on Ohio State and the way they did. And you can describe it, Balas. You mentioned the unbelievable talent that Ohio State has, all the NFL players all over the place. This reminds me of all the decades where we watched Michigan teams who weren't supposed to win, who didn't have all the highly recruited players, who didn't have as many NFL players, absolutely stomp Ohio State right into submission. And that's exactly what Michigan did in this football game. And Ohio State's guys are going to go on and make a lot of money in the NFL, and Michigan's going to have some too.
Yeah.
Number 97 being at the top of that list. But it was so gratifying to watch these players play their absolute best. And at the other side of the coin, for the first time in 10 plus years, Coach Ryan Day said after the game, they didn't play their best game, and they didn't. They had some of those NFL players are dropping footballs. They weren't exactly completing the process of the catches out there on the edge. And their offensive line, who I thought was pretty doggone good. I've been watching Ohio State pretty closely for a month. Offensive line just got beat by our defensive line, men on man, one on one across the front. And that's what you have to do to beat Ohio State, who is the standard in the Big Ten. And that's why it's such a big deal to beat them. And now it's about you as Michigan being the standard in the Big Ten and staying on top. That's for next year to talk about, Balas. But now it's a little bit different. We got one more game to go clinch this championship here. But the performance, top to bottom, right to left, was off the charts good.
Yeah.
Michigan football team, and it was just awesome to watch.
I was going to say the standard, Ohio State is not the standard this year at this point. It's going to
Not
be
anymore.
or Iowa, and that's the thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. But one thing that you always talk about is holding in blocks. And I was watching it, unfortunately, I watched football differently now. Thank you.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
to you. I actually give a damn about the guys. Sorry, I give a darn about the guys up front and what they're doing and how they're holding their blocks. Eric All, you mentioned him, and I was going to bring him up, and we'll show some plays, I'm sure, in the trenches. He was finishing his blocks, and on one of those first plays, I think it was a touchdown. He ran a guy out of bounds. He did not let go until that guy was on the gray there, and I'm like, that's what Skene is talking about. And to see them run out the clock with the ball in victory formation, but not just that, when it got down to an 8-point game, and you knew Ohio State wasn't going to go quietly,
Right.
everything that they did was a little bit discombobulated, but they still have playmakers. You can do everything right. Vince Gray on the touchdown pass was in great position. By the way, that kid's come a long way, and we'll talk about him. But he was right there to make a play. The guy made an NFL play. Another guy catches a ball off a guy's back. You get it. That's going to happen. But they didn't flinch. They didn't blink. And they come back down, and they ran it down their throats. And Skene, the way that the offensive linemen held their blocks, to me, was critical in this game and one of the reasons that they won this one.
Yeah, that was probably the main reason, Balas. They couldn't stop our running game. They could not do it. Vistardis there, all Big Ten. He's got to be first team all Big Ten center on the wide stretch. I can't remember what quarter it was in. It was either first or third. I can't remember. Where he did that, drop the shoulder, rip the arm through, and then did the old basketball box out thing again for Haskins or Corum. I think it was a Corum big run to break through. Vistardis has gotten so good, and I was talking again with my son and my wife. We're talking about the game, and it's just like we can go right down the roster and talk about you and I, Balas, talking through these in the trenches videos and looking at the stuff back from September and then October. And it's like, this guy's got to get better at this. You got to get better at this, and this has to be cleaned up. You're going to win this game at the end of the season. You have to be able to do this. And we're going to turn these plays on and watch this game again and show how exactly these guys got better at these things. And I'll say it again. Hats come off, total salute to the head football coach, Jim Harbaugh, his staff, Coach Sharon Moore, the offensive line coach, Mike Hart. The difference in that running back group, night and day. I just think it's night and day, the way that performance group, the running backs, has elevated their game. It's so good to see and so good to watch, obviously. But back to your point about sticky hands with Eric All, and this is what you have to do. If you want to play championship football, bumping and stopping and letting a guy fall off for a tackle 3 yards down the field is good, but it's not great. And you start sticking your hands on dudes and imposing your will and putting them on the ground and putting them in the backfield and really knocking them on the ground. Now you're doing something. And Ohio State, man, early in that game, it's like you saw looks on their faces since I've been watching them. They haven't had looks on their faces like that in a long time. Balas, we just beat them up. We just beat them up. And then And that's what happened in that football game. They could not stop that offensive line and that running game. And as long as that was the case, we knew that we had a chance. And then we just slammed the door on them because you can't block number 97. I don't know if obviously Aiden had a lot of plays in that game that we're going to remember, but the one that I don't know that anybody's going to really notice too much, but there was a play where he did not get a sack, but he came in on a bull rush and he was playing on the defensive right side.
Got a
And he
hand up.
came in on a bull rush and he took the left tackle from Ohio State and launched him into the air on his butt, on his back. It looked like something out of a movie from The Blind Side, right? But Aiden was the one doing that to the offensive lineman who was trying to pass block him. I had to run that back 3 times.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, did you
Yeah.
just see what he did to the left tackle?
Yeah.
And so those are why why he's going to be, top 5 draft pick. But that's the kind of thing any football players that ever want to play in that football game that wear the maize and blue, that's how you have to play to beat Ohio State.
Please God, don't let the Lions take him. For his sake, for the kid's sake. So that's all I got to say about him. 15 pressures on the quarterback, and Pro Football Focus said that is the highest total since they've been tracking this since 2014.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, in the Heisman in the Heisman race, and when you look around the country, I can't think of one guy who has impacted his team as much as Aiden Hutchinson has this year. If there's going to be a second defensive player, and I think he got in a little late, but he absolutely deserves to be on that list. The way he's played. Number two, I remember a conversation that we had when he was being recruited, and you were talking with Chris. And Chris was talking to you and said, Skene, man, is my kid. He asked you to watch film. He said, can he play? Can he play at this level? And you're watching his film, and two things stood out: his motor, number one, and his potential. He plays like his dad with the motor, but he's a little bit more physically gifted than dad. No offense, Chris, but what an unbelievable player.
Yeah, you take the old man there, Chris. You look at the way Chris played. You can turn on the old film. The motor is off the charts.
Yeah.
But Chris is only 6'3",
right?
And Aiden's just shy of 6'6", 275 ish or whatever, lean and just unbelievable. His technique has gotten so much better. That's credit to the coaching staff at Michigan has brought him up, and the training that he's put in since he broke his ankle last year. But yeah, I remember Hutch calling, going, "Hey, what do you think?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this guy's got to have a Big Ten body for sure."
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you never know. But good grief, I would not have predicted that he would have gone on to be one of the best pass rushers in all of college football by the time. But we knew the potential was there, and so I need to readjust my expectations when people ask, "Hey, is this guy going to be any good?" And start thinking, "Yeah, he's going to be great." And then my buddy asked me, "Hey, does Hutch have any other kids that are coming up through the ranks?"
Hey, there's still time. The clock might be ticking, but there's still time, Hutch. So
yeah, no, it was in a Jabo on the other side. Jabo, the season he's had and the way he played in that game and his speed rush and and I would say Mozzie Smith and Hinton in the middle. We haven't talked about them a lot. Michigan's defensive line gets talked about with the two guys on the ends. But those two dudes in the middle have very quietly had an outstanding season here, Balas, in making it difficult in the middle and collapsing pockets toward that quarterback and making it uncomfortable when the backs of those offensive linemen are coming in their face. You've got to give a lot of credit to those guys. And, of course, Ross, a middle linebacker, an outstanding game again. We can go up and down the list. We just, who else? Who do we have yet to mention?
Michael Barrett came in on third down pass coverage and was outstanding. Mozzie Smith sniffed out a screen pass and went to the sideline and got a back out of bounds. I mean, what a play!
Yeah.
It's
Morris with the tipped ball there. It was going to go out to the flat on the Michigan sideline there.
Yes.
Morris sat back and read the eyes of the quarterback, got up, got a fingertip on the football. All of them just again, just off the charts, really, really good. And what you got to do to beat Ohio State.
Right. Harrell had one too. Jalen Harrell off the edge where he the same play against Michigan State where he get blocked and didn't hold the edge, and Walker scores, gets off a block and crushes a guy for a 3-yard loss. And you were right about the faces. You could see it in Ohio State. They were flustered, and it started early with a bad snap. And then you had the 5 false start penalties. By the way, that crowd was unbelievable, electric. Wish you could have been there, but I know you were comfortable there in your big lounge, Barca lounger there.
I was in front of the fire. It was very comfortable and very
Yeah,
enjoyable.
I
And
bet it was.
it looked like Michigan Stadium was a great place to be, but I felt like I was there,
Yeah,
Al.
it was amazing. But then, and another thing that you said with sustaining it now. This is not okay. Finally beat Ohio State, and let's do it again in 10 years. As Cade McNamara said, the quarterback, he said, now we've done it. Let's not rest. He goes, we finally got there. And as Jim Harbaugh said, this feels like the beginning. Now, he kind of said about maybe the season, and things still to come, but you could sense it too that, okay, we finally figured out the formula here, and we've got a lot of good young talent here to do a lot of good things because the culture is fixed. And I don't care what anybody says. You and I have talked about this. Culture chemistry is the most important thing on a football team.
Well, you can mix in all the recruiting you want, and we've seen Michigan do that, and Jim Harbaugh has done that in his time. We've seen all the numerous players that he's put into the NFL that are active today on NFL rosters, all under Jim Harbaugh. But we keep talking about the special sauce and the magic ingredients into what makes championship football teams. And it is so hard to describe. And the only thing I can do is describe what I experienced myself. When you fill a roster and a locker room with a bunch of really talented football players, Balas, guys that are great at football, not necessarily athletes that happen to play football, but guys that love football. You fill a roster with those guys, then you mix in the right camaraderie, the right affection for one another, and how they look out for one another and they push each other. And yeah, they get in fights on the practice field and they want to beat the crap out of each other. And yet we're all pulling because we want to hold that trophy at the end of the year. And oh, by the way, if you do those things, you'll still get to go on and play in the NFL and make a gazillion dollars. But this is what it looks like when a team is helping each other up off the field. When an opposing player rips your helmet off, you have three offensive linemen in that dude's face immediately, ready to rip his head off. Thank God they didn't, because that would have been a bad thing. But
Yes.
they restrained themselves. But what a wonderful sight it was to see those offensive linemen. I think it was Hayes and Keegan
Yes.
over there in that D-back's face. Like, you want a piece of us? You
Right.
got to go through all of us. You mess with one of us, you get us all, just like the Kenny Chesney song, Balas. And it's how it works. And so, how do you develop that? How does a coach go out and recruit for that? Starts with finding guys that are football players that care about the team. And if you can fill the roster with those guys, and you mix in some fun and a chance to go and do it all that there is in college football, the sky's the limit. And we're seeing that with this year's Michigan team.
Yeah, I'm not sure who this Kenny Chesney fella is, but I'm going to take your word for it on that one. I'm not a country music guy, so no, you're not playing it on the golf course either. So maybe one song will give you.
I'll play
So
it next year.
yeah, I can't wait. You're probably right when I'm getting ready to tee off. So you're not like that. I know that you're not into the gamesmanship on the golf course. All right. I wanted to talk about the scuffle in the tunnel. I don't know if you saw the videos of it.
I did.
And,
Yeah.
yeah. Warms the cockles of your heart. And I get that people aren't going to like it. But when they're going in there and there's some chattering and then they get into the tunnel, uh, you could sense they're up 14-13 in Skene. It should have been a 7 or 10 point game. Okay. They left some points out there, dropped an interception. They had an interception, a bad interception. Cade McNamara, to his credit, he came back strong from that. And I asked him about that, and he said, you put it behind you. This kid's unflappable when it comes to
Yep.
things like that. But they're going in, they're up 14-13, and that was number two where I'm thinking, okay, we've seen this movie before. It's about finishing, and they go into that tunnel, and they looked like they were ready to just come out and kill somebody. And the second half adjustments were unbelievable.
Yep.
To me, that was another indication that, hey, there's a new sheriff in town type of thing.
Yeah. So again, I forgot to mention Josh Gaddis and calling these plays
Yes.
in this offense, along with Coach Harbaugh and that staff. Again, hats off to him for being able to come up with a game plan that really exposed Ohio State a little bit defensively, a lot defensively. But Balas, it was the Devin Bush game at Michigan State, and we talked about a turning point for Michigan football under Jim Harbaugh. And when Michigan State and D'Antonio and the whole laugh thing and the pregame walk thing, and we talked about how Michigan had finally figured out how to under Harbaugh had finally figured out how to play that football game where you have to match violence with your own higher level of violence. And this game against Ohio State reminded me of that. In that little locker room scene that we all saw, where they're about to just get in a back alley fight, was kind of what that turned into, right? It looked like the performance through the first half, and then that little thing in the locker room there, it looked like a program and a team and players, and it looks like some assistants and maybe some equipment guys that had just had enough of
Yeah.
getting their butts kicked by Ohio State. Like, this is it. This ends today.
Yep.
We're going to beat your ass today up and down this field. We're going to put you back on these buses. You're going to get your chicken sandwich and ride your ass back home to Columbus. And we'll see you next year down there. And that you just sit there and you just go, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. That's what it looked like on the field. And, us Michigan fans and myself included, even in that second half, I'm like, Ohio State is so good. It ain't over. It ain't over. It ain't over.
Mm-hmm.
And so late in that fourth quarter, I was like, yeah, we've taken the life out of these guys.
Yeah.
And their NFL talent, which is well documented, wasn't enough to beat an emotional Michigan team, which, going back to January, like McNamara talked about, had just had enough of this crap, and we're done. And here we are, and we are not going anywhere.
Yeah.
This is the blueprint for next year's Michigan team, and the year after that, and the year after that. This 10-year run of Michigan getting smoked and get our faces rubbed in it by Ohio State ended Saturday.
Yeah, and now they got to keep it going forward. Mike McDonald's defense was outstanding. The way he disguised his defenses, two things. Number one, the signals weren't telegraphed, so Ohio State didn't know what was coming or when. And there were times that it looked like they were expecting one thing, and you see Michigan drop. There was one bad play where David Ojabo was lined up, I think, on a running back, and that didn't go so well, or a receiver. It didn't go well. However, the rest of it did. And we can talk about 396 yards for CJ Stroud all day long. I don't care. He was going to get his yardage, and some of that yardage was really well earned, but they had to work for everything. And it took some miraculous plays for them to keep drives alive. It kept a lot of 4-down drives because they were playing catch up all game. I thought he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, boy, night and day again. The defense, the multiple looks, and Stroud got his yards, and those wide receivers are absolutely as good as advertised. But boy, he paid a price for it, Balas. That kid was on the ground, running for his life, getting hit, getting sacked. His offensive line looked a little rattled at times. Dudes turning around, looking at each other, hands going up in the air. You can just, having been there myself and done that a couple of times, I know what frustrated offensive lines look like.
Yeah.
That's what Ohio State's line looked like at times, because how do you block guys? You just can't, first of all, you don't know where they're coming from. And even when you do know where they're coming from, they run right around you or run right over you. And so McDonald's defensive staff, again, the lowest grade, they all get A's in my mind, all of it for this performance. But what a difference in, again, previous coaching, Don Brown, the defense against Ohio State, and just sitting in there and letting Ohio State do what they do. Again, just kind of characterize it as Michigan saying, no more. We are not going to sit back on our heels and just play this game tentatively. We are firing all guns. We are coming after you with everything we've got. And it showed again defensively. And when you can cause a quarterback and his offensive line those kinds of problems and that kind of frustration, and when you physically just beat someone, it rips the football life out of your heart, Balas. That's what you do to opponents. We did that many years ago to opponents. You and I have talked about it in our podcast about how you demoralize an opponent. Michigan's defense, in spite of the fact that Ohio State got all those yards, Michigan's defense ultimately did that to Ohio State's offense.
And selfishly, by the way, the special teams were great again, just fantastic. And Jay Harbaugh, helmet sticker to him. I mean, that guy has had a great year in that respect, and his tight ends played lights out on Saturday. I kind of liken this to. I was thinking about the Michigan State game when they're smoking their cigars in the locker room after the Michigan game, and with Purdue coming up, I'm like, all right, they're getting beat next week. Now you got another game coming up against a physical team. Now this is not a good football team. I mean, it's a solid football team, not a great football team, not a great offensive team especially, but they are physical and they're going to come to play. And I likened it to the 1980 the United States hockey team beating the Soviets. They still have a gold medal game to play against Finland, right? And they come out, they're down 2 periods, and they come back and rally. But this is a big one. They still got a lot at stake here, man. They haven't finished the job. How worried are you about them coming back next week and not being flat?
I don't think this team's going to be flat.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're absolutely going to run into a well-coached Iowa team. Coach Ferentz has been there forever. His teams are always well prepared, well coached. They block and they tackle. They play football. And Iowa is known to try to do exactly what Michigan's team is identifying this year is just physical, and we're just going to beat you up. And so it'll be brute versus brute. And this is the weird thing right now. In years past, the last time we did this against Ohio State, it was like, oh, we just won the Big Ten. Not yet. We got another challenge here, and this is something unfamiliar to me about getting over this hump that you've identified and all the signs in the building and everything you've worked for to beat Ohio State, but you still don't have the championship banner to hang. You have to go earn that next against an Iowa team that'll be looking to absolutely wreck your whole year. And so but again, for all the reasons that you and I have talked about so far in the chemistry, in the visual, in the body language, I don't see a letdown here. I think suddenly Michigan has taken this giant step over its number one rival, and now we're looking into the horizon at much bigger things to go get. And part of that now is this championship ring, this Big Ten championship title to hang in Schembechler Hall there with all the other great teams that have ever done it. And now you're into that playoff, and there's a chance you might get Cincinnati in the first round of it. And then you get it to go up against whoever gets out of that other side, which I think is going to be Georgia. And you just never know what could happen, Balas. And this feels like the kind of team that has the kind of players that are like, why not us? Let's
Right.
go like this.
That's fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Last night, I had a glass of Charles Woodson Chardonnay in honor of the honorary captain. He was
Yeah.
emotional. You could see it. I thought about a chicken sandwich, but I'm trying to cut down on my carbs. It's been a long, hard season in that respect, Skene. So it is what it is. But great stuff as always. We will talk soon. We'll talk before the game. We got another week, buddy. Another couple chicken sandwiches for you. We get to talk a little bit more, and we'll do Wednesday. We'll do our podcast. We'll do our breakdown in the trenches. We'll go over some plays. Lots of good ones this week. But as always, appreciate your contributions.
All right, Balas, go blue.